Hi, I'm Ali Eilert and I run a company called Heritage Estate Planning, and we specialise in helping people make wills, lasting powers of attorney, trusts, funeral plans and probate. Today I wanted to talk to you about wills. Well, specifically to answer a question that I get asked quite often about a will, and that is, when should I make a will? Or conversely, if I've already made a will, when should I review it? So I'm going to attempt to answer that. First of all, as a rule of thumb, if nothing really has changed, I would say that it's really good practice to review your will with your will writer, your solicitor, whoever you've made your will with. It's really good idea to review that at least once every 5 years. So a will is something that should be a living, breathing document, not something you make once, put in a drawer, and then when you're really old, it gets taken out of the drawer and used, because your life will change. We all know that life is full of surprising twists and turns. So it's really important that that's a document that reflects your ongoing life and your wishes throughout your life. So I would say at least once every 5 years. But also, if you experience a big life change during those 5 years, it's a really, really good idea to review your will. And I'm going to attempt to go through what some of those life changes might be. So the first one, really big one, is if you get married. So if you get married, and there is one caveat to this, but I'll say the whole thing first. So if you get married, you've made a previous will, that will is immediately invalid when your new marriage takes place. It's just the law. It's just the way that it is. The only exception to that is if you were with your long-term partner, let's say you were living with your long-term partner or engaged or something, and your will writer asked you if you were likely to get married to that person in the future, and you said, yes, absolutely, that's our intention. Then if they put an in contemplation of marriage clause in the will, then your will still be valid if you've married the person that's named in that clause. Okay, so if there is no clause in your will talking about in contemplation of marriage, then you absolutely must make a new will if you get married. Okay, really important. The second big life change is almost the opposite of that if you get divorced. If you get divorced, so by divorced, I mean finalised, decree, absolutely, completely divorced. If you're divorced, you need to make a new will just to make sure that your wishes are still accurate. By law, any mention of your ex-spouse will be treated as though they've died before you. So it may not be a complete disaster. If you've appointed them as your only beneficiary in your will without any kind of contingency, then it is a disaster, because in effect it will be as though you've not written a will at all. So if you get divorced, it's really good practice and really advisable to review your will and update it and make sure it reflects your new situation. The limbo area is separation. If you are separated from your spouse, then technically, legally, you are still married. So if you've made a will, that will absolutely stand up. So if you've left everything to your ex-spouse from whom you're now separated and you die, that will happen. So if you are separated or going through a separation, then it's really, really advisable that you update your will to take into account any wishes that you have around that separation and your new situation. Because until you are legally divorced, you're still legally married, and your previous will absolutely stands up. Another really big area is if you have children. So if you have children, this is a wonderful and joyous thing, but it is super important that you update your will to ensure that you've appointed guardians for your children. So the people that you know and you trust to take care of your children if the absolute worst happens to you. And you also probably want to update your beneficiaries in your will once you've had children. So it prompts lots of questions and conversations, and absolutely something to get the will out for, to review, to make sure it's still absolutely right. If you move to a new house, if you buy a new property, or if you just buy some investment property, for example, very important to update your will. Property is a big asset, and it could change the wishes that you have for the distribution of your overall estate. So if you buy a house, that should prompt your mortgage advisor, I'm sure, will be talking to you about making sure that your will is up to date. If you receive an inheritance, that's another area that should prompt you to think, actually, my assets are now considerably different, and therefore this might impact on who I want to leave them to, who I want to mention in my will. And just all those questions that could be going through your mind. It would be a really good time to review your will. If somebody that you've named in your will, perhaps one of your executors or a beneficiary or a guardian for your children, if one of those really important people dies, it is very, very important to review your own will and just make sure that your will still stands up, and that you perhaps consider appointing a replacement executor if you haven't done so already, or guardian, or depending on who it is that's died. But that absolutely prompts a review. Sad situation, if you ever have a really big family fallout, you have a dispute with somebody, it's really worthwhile reviewing your will and just seeing, is there anything extra that needs to be documented, either in your will itself, in a letter of wishes, or in the notes that the will writer will hold on file. Your will writer or solicitor will be able to give you some advice on this, but it's a horrible situation, but sadly a very common situation. So if you have a dispute, talk to your will writer and we can advise you on the best way to move forward. If you have any other really big life changes, so off the top of my head, I'd be thinking if you've started a business perhaps, then there's all sorts of things that we can put in the will to make sure that your business continues to trade if something happens to you. And just generally making sure that you've got all the right clauses in place if anything like that has happened, or any other big changes. If you've experienced a life change yourself, or you haven't reviewed your will for a long time, you've got any questions about your own situation, pick up the phone, give me a call, or send me an email. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you've got. All of our consultation meetings are completely free, and we only start proceeding and doing work for you once you're completely happy that all your questions have been answered, and that you've signed our letter of engagement. So up to that point, absolutely any questions that you have, more than happy to answer. I'll hopefully speak to you all soon, and hopefully you found that useful. Thank you.